Good morning. I always feel so welcome when I come here. I go around, everybody's smiling at me. And people even come out here and shake my hand and tell me all kinds of things. Nice things, of course. Anyway, I'm so happy to be here. And you've heard the warning from Ping Chuan earlier that you're going to sing a hymn of response that you're not used to. But let me tell you, it is part of the sermon. So if you are going to sing that song, you're singing into the sermon. I claim responsibility for choosing the song, not Rupert, okay? In case some of you are going to crucify him for that. No, it's actually me. And I also want to thank the choir because they had to change their scores to suit their beautiful voices. So they could then sing the song. And I want to thank Rupert too because later Rupert will be under pressure to join in the choir. But it's so wonderful that we are a church that's willing to be faithful and adjust to the quirks of the speaker. Thank you so much. And by the way, normally I start my sermon by thanking the pastors. They're not here. They are not raptured. But they are away overseas. And we must remember them when they're overseas, especially now at this moment. I think the young adults are completing their retreat, and Pastor Jeremy is with them now. So always remember your pastors, wherever they are, and may God's favor and rest be upon them. Let's always remember that. Okay? All right, let's begin with the sermon for today on the book of Judges. But before that, the prayer for illumination. Let's say it together. Lord, open our hearts and minds by the power of your Holy Spirit, that as the scriptures are read and your word proclaimed, we may hear with joy what you say to us today. Amen. Today is the last sermon from our series from the book of Judges. I've been given this title here, Micah, Godless Legitimacy, based on Judges 17 to 18. Now, let me warn you, it's one of my most difficult sermons, so I need you to pay attention, okay? Now, it's very stressful for me to preach after 3 pastors. And it's even more stressful if you are the last speaker to end the sermon. You know, it's like a 4x100 meter race. You know what's it like? The first 3 runners are so fast, and I'm the last runner. So I've learned from that race is that the first 3 pastors have done it so well. They've given me such a wide lead, and I only need to do one thing. You know what's the one thing I need to do? Don't drop the baton. Very important. Well, you've heard of the 4 heroes on the book of Judges, Gideon, Deborah, Jephthah, and Samson. And the last character we're going to deal with is a person called Micah. Micah? Micah who? This Micah is not a hero. So we will end this whole series with a non-hero. We'll end it with a 0. But why? Why has God included Micah into this story? You know what God is saying to us? You may not be a Gideon, you may not be a Samson, but all of us, we are Micahs. We are Micahs because he is just like you and me. And God is showing to us that he knows us. He says to us, you have a human nature and you have a dark side. And like Micah, all of us have a dark side. So the stories in Judges 17 and 18 are pretty dark. So when the church sent me the slides to prepare, they're all in dark colors. So bear in mind, we are ending this sermon on a dark note? No, of course, I will never let you end on a dark note. But I wanted you to feel the sense of the darkness in this story. What I was planning to do was I was going to ask the team there to switch off all the lights, and then you'll be in darkness. And then to turn it back on, and then you will see light. Then I changed my mind. Because if the lights don't come back on, you'll be in total darkness. And then I won't get invited to preach again. And therefore, please stay with me for this sermon right to the end, and you will see light in the darkness. I will never leave you in the dark, okay? And the theme of this whole sermon, you will always see darkness and light. There will be 3 points in my sermon: darkness in the book of Judges, light in the time of Judges, and light from the heroes of the faith. So let's begin with darkness in the book of Judges. What is this darkness that the Bible talks about? Jesus explains it very well in Matthew 6, verse 22 to 23, where he says, the eye is the lamp of the body, and if your eyes are good, the whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. And if there is darkness in you, how great is that darkness? So you can see here, Jesus explains it very well, that light and darkness comes from the way we choose to see a situation. And not just seeing with our physical eyes, but seeing with the eyes of our heart. It's not just eyesight, it's insight. And the way we see will determine whether there is darkness or there's light in your life. So, for this sermon, help you understand throughout a simple way what is light, what is darkness. Light is this, where you choose to see the way God sees. Simple to understand that. You choose to see the way God sees, you will see light. And darkness comes when you choose not to see the way God sees. So simple understanding there, which means it's very practical, it's not philosophical. Light and darkness depends on how we choose. How you choose will influence whether a situation is dark or a situation has light. So let me share with you a practical understanding of this. It happened to me on 31st of August, just a few hours before I was leaving on my tour to New Zealand. I went to a coffee shop. I went to buy chicken rice. So they gave me chicken rice in a box. So I went to the next store to buy coffee. And then the coffee man put my hot coffee in a plastic bag, and he put it on my box of chicken rice, and it rolled off. It landed on my foot, it splashed open, and it scalded my foot. I was in deep, deep pain, and the man looked frightened. He wondered what he should do next. So he looked at his boss lady. What should he do next? Meanwhile, I feel sorry for him. So I took out my $2 note to pay for the next bag of coffee. But inside my heart, I hope he won't charge me. Then his boss lady looked at him and told him it by her eyes, charge him. So I paid my $2. And meanwhile, my feet was boiling hot. You know, if this case had happened in McDonald's, US, they would have to pay me $2 million for damages. But it's not to be. It took place in a coffee shop in Serangoon Road. Well, I was in pain. I was in pain as I walked back, and I asked God, why? Hey, I'm going to New Zealand. I need to walk, you know. And now I cannot walk because it's all scalded. So I said, God, why did you let this happen to me? That's what I thought of as I went home. And I asked God, why? Why must such unhappy things happen when I'm about to go on a happy trip? And then as I talked to God, these thoughts came to me, whereby it's like God asking me back, hey, why must things always work according to your way? And why can't you trust God for what happened to you? You know, if you can't even trust God for a scalding incident, how can you ever trust God for something even more serious than that? So as I spoke to God, listened to His rebuke, I began to see things the way God sees. I began to trust Him that things will work out well on my trip, and light began to enter my darkness. The darkness that I felt earlier, and there is, therefore, my friends, darkness when you can't see the way God sees. But when you see the way God sees, when you trust in God's goodness, when you believe in God's control over all things in your life, there is light. There is light because you can see the way God sees. So, my friends, when we see the way God sees, God's light will drive out your darkness. You know the heroes that we talk about in the book of Judges? They are not superheroes. They are all broken heroes. Broken because they were imperfect and they have many flaws. But yet, despite their flaws, God used them to deliver Israel from their enemies. The lesson there is for us. God can use us in spite of our flaws to work out His purposes. So, never discount your flaws. God can use you just as He used the judges. Well, I've been given this topic on godless legitimacy. But what does godless legitimacy mean? When we go into Judges chapter 17 to 18, it will illustrate what godless legitimacy looks like. The story starts with Micah. This man is not the Micah in the Old Testament. Huh? Many of you ask me, oh, this one is a Micah. No. It's not the same Micah. It's another person called Micah, ordinary man, and he lived during the time of the judges. And the story revolves around the choices made by Micah and his mother. And they chose according to their way and not God's way. They have no regard for God when making their choices. They just did it their way. So if mother and son had the theme song will be, I did it my way. Okay, those of you who are old enough, this is how Frank Sinatra looked like when he was much younger. But to help you remember, this is quite key. I did it my way actually explains the book of Judges very clearly. But to help you remember this sermon, this passage, just remember 3 M's, okay? Like 3M adhesive. Micah, my mom, my way. Easy to remember? That sums up Judges 17, 18. Okay? Micah, my mom, my way. This summarizes the problem, like I said, in the book of Judges. The problem starts with Micah, then his mom made the problem worse. And both Micah and his mom chose to do things their way and not God's way. And their choice brought darkness into their family and later into the tribe of Israel and into the 10 tribes of Israel. But what caused such darkness? What happened to them that resulted in such darkness in their lives? And Judges 17, verse 6 explains this very well by saying that in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they saw fit. The attitude was, I will do it my way. I'll do it my way. So they chose according to their way, not God's way. And this problem, like I said, was highlighted throughout the book of Judges. And when you see the way you want to see, darkness will come into your life. Okay, let's now look at Judges 17, verses 1 to 3. I'll just tell you the story. You don't even have to read. I'll tell you the story. One time, there was a man called Micah, and he stole from his mother. Can you imagine stealing from your mother? And he didn't just steal $10, What did he steal? 1,100 shekels of silver. Let me give you an idea what that is equivalent to, okay? Modern standard. 1,100 shekels of silver. Later, you find that Micah paid his priest an annual salary of 10 shekels per year. So you divide 1,100 divided by 10 is 110 years of salary. Taking a median salary of 5,000 in Singapore, he stole $6.6 million from his mother. That's serious, Obviously, they're rich enough. Anyway, he took that money from his mother, Then his mother cursed without knowing who is the thief. It so happened that she found out later it was her son. But Micah was so afraid of the curse, he then confessed to his mother that he did it. So his mother was so relieved that she, look at verse 3, consecrated her silver to the Lord to make an image overlaid with silver. So here you see, godless legitimacy. She was so overjoyed, wanted to thank her God by what? Making an image. And she knows, Micah also knows, you don't make an image. That's against God's law. That is not legitimate. Well, they did it their way. So they made the idol. Not only that, look at verse 5. In verse 5, Micah even went further. He thought he'd become even more religious. He made a shrine. Then he made an ephod. An ephod is like a priestly garment. And then he added on some more. He added on some more household gods. And then you cannot have God without a priest, right? So you cannot find a priest. So what did he do? He installed his son as a priest. That's really godless legitimacy. He thinks he created a legitimate worship, but it had a worship without God in it. Why? Verse 6 explains it. In those days, Israel had no king because everyone did as they saw fit. Frank Sinatra, I did it my way. They did what suited their thinking. They did things their way and not God's way. And this brought darkness into their lives. Well, these verses show godless legitimacy in practice. They carved an image, as you can see. They broke God's commands. They had the right religious objects. And according to them, they even have a priest. But it was godless because God was not considered in their decision. When they made their choice, they did it their way. They didn't even bother with God. Or at best they do. They just say, God, you just joined one of my gods. That, my friend, was one of the most dangerous things to do when God is joining one of your gods. We'll find out more a bit later. In any case, you can see here, Micah, my mom, my way. They decided to do things their way, and this is godless legitimacy. So remember, darkness comes into your lives when you can't see the way God sees, and when you begin to do things your way. So quickly into verse 6 onwards, things got even darker. Let me summarize for you. He met a young Levite. He's a very interesting guy. Pay attention. Pay attention to this Levite. But he met this young Levite. He appointed him as his priest so that, why? He can legitimize his worship. He can make his worship more legal. Now he actually have a Levite. A Levite is a servant who served in the tabernacle or the temple. So therefore, more authentic than his son. Remember, his son was the one he first chose. So what he did was, he kicked out his son, he put in Micah. That is Micah. Sorry, he put in the young Levite. And that is Micah for you. And now look at Micah's reaction. In verse 13 of Judges 17, he said, now I know the Lord will be good to me since the Levite has become my priest. You notice that? Lord is good to him because now he's made his worship more legitimate because now he's got a priest. But you and I know he has created idolatry. Then the story shifts in Judges 18 to the tribe of Dan. Here, the tribe of Dan was one of the tribes of Israel, and they were looking for a place of their own. Then they found this city that was defenseless, that was wealthy, but the people could not defend themselves. The city was Laish. So on the way to this city, they met Micah's priest. Now you notice Micah's priest quite a character, okay? Right? First he replaced the Micah's son. Then when the Danites offered him a job, they told him, what for you go and serve Micah? He only household God. I tribe the whole tribe. So better to serve me. And he thought it's quite a good idea. And then this priest went on to allow the Danites to just take away all of Micah's idols. So you see, for him, he did it his way. Whatever suits him, whatever benefits him, God is not important. Just take all the idols of Micah. Anyway, it doesn't belong to me. So Micah later gave chase. And then he caught up with the Danites. And then he said to them, how can you take away everything that I have? You took the gods I made. Look at verse 24 of Judges 18. You took the gods I made and my priests, and you went away. What else do I have? This is a very sad cry. It's a sad cry because it reveals the power of idolatry in Micah's life. You know what are just idols? Idols are not just religious objects you put in your home. Idols can be something or even someone in your life which really defines you, gives you your identity, makes you feel worthy, makes you feel secure. So these idols can be your job. Okay? Some of us, when we have a job, we feel secure, we feel identified, we feel worthy. Then once you lose the job, you lose everything. It can also be your children. Some of you built your lives on your children. Your children are the one that gives you face, that you can boast to your friend how well your children are doing. And they become your idol. And once you lose your relationship with your children, Micah, you will say like Micah, I have lost everything. What else do I have? So my friends, don't center yourself on anything other than God. Center your life on anything other than God, and your life will be unstable. Your life will have darkness. But God is good. God gives us gifts. So let's hold on lightly to what God has given us and remind ourselves that we are only stewards. So whatever you have, they are just gifts from God. You don't own them. You don't own your children. You don't own your money. You don't even own your health. Whatever you have, it's from God. So if ever you lose them, you have lost what you did not own. Lesson for us. Everything we have are gifts from God. We don't own anything. If we ever lose anything, we lost because we did not own it in the first place. I hope this makes you feel better if your pocket got picked. Anyway, let's continue the story. Danites were just too strong for Micah, so he gave up, went back home. And then the Danites attacked an innocent city called Laish. They massacred the people. They burned down the city so that they can have it as their city and name it after their forefather Dan. So my friends, when we don't see the way God sees, we do things our way, and then we bring darkness into our lives. That's why the book of Judges is so dark. That's why the darkness of the judges occur, because they did things their way. They did as they saw fit. Well, there's a sequel to this. After that, the problem became more and more big. What happened now is that the Danites then went on to set up the idols that they took from Micah's house, and they started an alternative worship center, even though the official worship center was in Shiloh. So these dark stories remind us to be careful how we choose. So what started out in a small household became later a national religion. So what's the point for us to learn? The problem that we have can start with small choices. These were just small choices made by Micah, right? They started their own in-house religion, and then watch how they choose. What they chose became later a national religion. So my friends, let's align our choices, our small choices, with God's thinking, because your small choices can have large consequences. Now comes the interesting story about this Levite, right? He's quite a central character in this. Who was this Levite? You know how bad he was. I already mentioned, he made Micah's godless religion even more acceptable. He gave away Micah's idols. He played Micah out. He'd rather be a priest of a tribe than of a small household so that he can benefit himself. If you were his parents, you won't be very proud of him. Who was he? Who was this man? He was Jonathan, the son of Gershom, the son of Moses. Judges 18 verse 30. So he was a descendant of Moses. He was not like Moses, but he was godless. And if you were his parent, you would have been very hurt to see your child wander away like this. But I like CMC's attitude as far as wandering prodigals are concerned. What's CMC's attitude? Bring them home. We trust God and they will be back. Pray for them. Do our part for them. If you have actually read carefully the end of Samson's life in Judges 16, the last verse in Judges 16, it says there, Samson was buried in Manoah's grave. You know what that means? Manoah had died. Manoah was Samson's father. So Samson's father never saw him come back to the Lord. So things can still happen, no? After you go away. Keep on hoping, keep on praying, because God can do things that you can never imagine can happen. So my friends, we do raise up our children to trust in God, but let's trust in God to bring our prodigals back. And God will. All right, more than 30 years ago, I think Ping Chen was one of them who maybe helped the Joy Bells. There was this singing group called the Joy Bells. And I remember listening to them, and they did this musical called My Way or Yahweh, or they sang a song from there. My Way or Yahweh. Yahweh means God, God in Hebrew. So the play on the words is My Way or Yahweh, the choice is up to you. And that's a line that is sung throughout the song. So here they're reminding us, choose God. Always choose God, because God's way is better than our way. So what about us? Will we choose to do it God's way? You know what the problem with us? At least with me, definitely. You can still have God, but you rely less on Him. You can still have God and you rely less on Him because God is going to be less important to you, because He's lining up with all your other options. You know, you got money, you got power, you got influence. God is just lining up. In fact, God warned in Exodus 20:23. He told the Israelites, don't make any gods to be alongside me. No. God says, I'm not going to line up with all your gods. Don't make me less than what I am. And godless can be spelled godless. That means make God less than who He is, so that you can basically decide what you want to do. You can minimize God or you make Him more manageable. And God knows. God knows you and I have this tendency. That's why He says in Psalm 50 verse 21, He says, you thought I was just like you. God says, you think I'm just like you? Because I'm no better than you. I cannot be wiser than you. That's what you think. Of course, you say, no lah. We respect God. We come to Christ Methodist Church, you know. We respect God. We honor God. But I tell you, in your heart, some of us think God is not wiser than us. How do I know? You take Chaman Boy's scalding accident just now, lah. Right? What did I tell God? How can this happen to me? I'm going to New Zealand, you know. So I think I'm wiser than God, right? Or this one is the best classic example of why we think we are just as good as God. All of you pray for something. You pray for healing, for instance. And then you don't get healed. And you get upset with God. You know what is the attitude there? Your attitude there is you are telling God, if I were God, I would heal. That is our problem. We all think that we are just like God. So my friends, don't make God manageable. Don't make Him controllable. Don't minimize Him. Because when you downsize God, you upsize your problems. What do I mean by that? You know, when God is very big, whatever problems you face will be very small. But if God is so small, He's just one of your many options, your problems are going to be very big. So my friends, don't downsize God, upsize your problems when you downsize God. I want to say this especially to the worship, the choir and all the worship team people, that these words that I remember from My Way and Yahweh goes way back 30 years ago, which shows you that people remember lyrics of songs better than they remember words from sermon. I remember it. After 30 years, I still remember the song, My Way or Yahweh, the choice is up to you. So pay attention to the lyrics when you sing, especially later when we sing the song of response. There is a meaning in those lyrics. All right, now we go to the second point, which is there was light in the time of Judges. We heard that it's so dark. But your God is not a God who leaves you in darkness. He is a God who says, I provided light. But the problem is you and I can't see the light. So you find that in the book of Judges, after the book, there's a book of Ruth. And in the book of Ruth, it's a book of light. Because Ruth lived during the time of the Judges. During a dark period, Ruth lived. And the story goes like this, that Ruth had a mother-in-law called Naomi. And Naomi migrated to a foreign land. And when she was in the foreign land, her husband died, her 2 sons died. Now that's very serious. You have lost all your means of economic survival. You lose your husband, you lose your 2 sons, you are poor, you are helpless. That was the condition Naomi was in, and then she went to say in Ruth 1:21, I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. The Lord has afflicted me, the Lord Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. But what Naomi did not see was that God has provided light in her darkness. What she could not see, that God has provided for her a daughter-in-law called Ruth. And Ruth was such a faithful daughter-in-law. She followed Naomi home, even though Naomi said, you don't need to follow me. She was committed to care for Naomi until death separated them. And God honored Ruth. God honored Ruth's faithfulness. The story has a happy ending. Like some of your K-drama, I was told. Has a happy ending in that Ruth later married and then gave birth to a son Obed, and from Obed came King David, and from King David came our Savior Jesus Christ. So what started in darkness will end in light. And there's light in Naomi's life. There's light in the darkness because God was there. God was in their darkness. No matter how thick your darkness is, just remember this. Exodus 20:21. God is in your thick darkness. No darkness is so thick that God cannot be there. Now let's move on to the last point. Light from the heroes of the faith. We found how dark it was in Judges. We see now there's actually light provided for in Judges if we learn to see the way God sees. And now, light from the heroes of the faith. Now, there are 3 features of the way the heroes have changed. I'm going to show you that the heroes in the book of Judges have been transformed, How were they transformed? First point. Their sins were recorded, but now not remembered. So you read the book of Judges, you find that all their sins were recorded, how bad they were, how cruel they were, how Samson killed so many people. But when you get to the book of Hebrews, it's not there. He's remembered as a hero without all those flaws. My friend, what happened? What happened between Judges and Hebrews? This also happened. Hebrews 10:17 says this, their sins and lawless acts I will remember no more. Their sins and their lawless acts I will remember no more. So what happened was, whatever sins they have committed, although they were recorded in Judges, they were forgotten in the book of Hebrews because God remembered their faith. God remembered the faith of these broken heroes. And that gives us all comfort because we too have sins and lawless acts. But God, in His mercy, tells us, I can forget them. I can forgive you. So, my friends, come to the throne of grace. Know that darkness recorded about you is no longer remembered. Why? Because you are able to put your faith in the saving grace of Jesus Christ. And through Jesus' death on the cross, your sins are forgiven and you are rescued from darkness into light. So remember, whatever sins you have, go to Jesus, confess it, they are forgiven. Now the second transformation took place for these heroes, took place in their battlefields. What were the battlefields that they fought on? Because some of you may ask me, I'm not a warrior. What? I'm not a warrior like all these people. I don't have the cleverness of Gideon. I don't have the courage of Deborah. I don't have the skillful fighting skills of Jephthah. And I don't even have the super strength of Samson. So what have all these people got to do with me? Because if you think like that, you have allowed darkness to come into your thinking. So choose to see the way God sees. See how God sees the heroes. First, in Hebrews 11, he has two groups of heroes. The first group were the heroes who fought on the physical battlefield. You see here, Gideon, Samson, Jephthah, God remembers them in all their bravery. But there's this group B that I want us to think about. The group B heroes, their battlefield was in their minds. Okay? Group A fought outwardly. Group B fought inwardly. I tell you why. You look at these verses here. These people were tortured, refusing to turn from God in order to be set free. Why was it so important? Because during that time, they were being persecuted. They were asked to worship Caesar. They were asked to do emperor worship. And actually, all they needed to do, they can say attend church, but all they needed to do was, Caesar is Lord. That's all they needed to do. 3 words, and you are free. But these people know that if I do that, I am putting God alongside my other idols. So you find them. They hope in a better life after the resurrection. They refuse to be set free. They were jeered at, cut open, put in prison, mistreated, and so on. They were badly mistreated, but to them, they will never minimize God. They never let the God less than who He is. So my friends, battles are always fought first in the mind. And these people, they fought their doubts, they fought their darkness, they fought their difficulties because they will never let God be minimized. So, fight the battles of the mind, fight it with faith. Fight it with a weapon of faith. And finally, the third transformation took place based on how God defined the heroes. How did God define them? They became heroes because of how God sees them. Very important. God sees them as heroes of the faith because they were faithful stewards. You know, God didn't remember their fighting skills, but God remembered their faithfulness. You know, recently in our anniversary video, we had 2 honorary stewards that were featured. You remember who they are? Wu Tisu is one of them, and Peter So. You remember? Now, I told Tisu last week, hey Tisu, I want to talk about you, no? Tisu, so embarrassed. He said, yeah, I'm not hero. I said, you hero. But you listen to my sermon and you find out why I say, are you hero? You're a hero because you're a faithful steward, not because you can fight. Very important. Faithfulness. So who you are is not defined by how you see yourself. Who you are is defined by how how God sees you. So, you look at the way God sees. How does God see Ruth and Samson? We see Ruth as not a hero because she cannot fight. But God sees Ruth as a hero because she's faithful. So therefore, friends, let's follow God's definition of a hero. Someone who is a faithful steward. Well, even now, as I'm talking, some of you are probably thinking of all the different people that have influenced your life. I remember Tisu mentioning to me about my mother-in-law, Mrs. Tan Bing Leong. Well, my mother-in-law loves the Lord. She has since gone on to be with the Lord. She was also an honorary steward, local church executive committee member, WSCS president of Christ Methodist Church, and went on to be General Conference WSCS president for 8 years. But besides her leadership responsibilities, she also taught at grassroots levels special needs children as a volunteer. She taught them also the Bible. And she can't speak Hokkien well, but in her broken Hokkien, she witnessed to taxi drivers. So she went even on mission trips. So recently I met a track leader who told me a story of my mother-in-law. He said that when he was a young man, my mother-in-law was so encouraging to him. He said he had just finished speaking publicly, and my mother-in-law gave him an honest feedback. And then she told him words which up to today he still remembers. She told him, you know, although your words not very clear, but I can learn from your message. And to him, he still remembers it today. And today he's a very well qualified lawyer speaking very well. But I want you to think not of my mother-in-law as perfect. She has her sins, she has her weaknesses. But the positive thing for us is that God does not work with weaknesses. God does not work with strength, but God works with our weaknesses. So on the night of Maundy Thursday, my mother-in-law served Holy Communion. Tisu told me she sent her back that very night. The following day, my mother-in-law passed on to the Lord. Well, anyway, before she passed on, my wife visited her, and she encouraged my wife to always serve the Lord. When she passed on, they found her keeled over in a kneeling position beside her bed with her hands clasped as in prayer. We believe in her last moments, in the battlefield of her mind, she was in pain, but she was also in prayer. So, my friends, the weapons we fight with are not weapons of this world. The weapons we fight with are divine weapons like prayer. There's a song that goes like this. So when I fight on my knees, and every fear I lay at your feet, I'll sing through the night, oh God, the battle belongs to you. So my mother-in-law fought her last moments on her knees, relying on her God. But I look back at all our heroes of faith, as God has defined them to be faithful stewards. We celebrated our 94th anniversary. We're going on into our 100th. And I want us to remember all these heroes of faith. They are our parents, our relatives, our spouses, our children, our godly friends, our church leaders, and our pastors. All these people are regarded as heroes because of their faithfulness, not because of their fighting skills. So remember, Your God is a God who remembers your faithfulness in the home, in the schools, in the workplace, in the community, in the mission field, and in the church. So I want to end this series of the book of Judges, not in darkness, but in the celebratory light of hope that we see in how God looks at heroes of faith. The darkness of the book of Judges has turned into light in the book of Hebrews because God remembers faithfulness. So what we're going to end today, we're going to remember the faithfulness of all those who have gone before us. In fact, these heroes of faith that have gone before us are not just going to be memories in our hearts. These heroes of faith are now alive in God, and they will reappear in resurrected bodies when they return with the Lord. And there will be a day when Lord Jesus Christ returns, and He'll return as our King. And when our King returns, He'll drive out the earth's final darkness. And when our King returns, He will return not alone. He will return with our faithful heroes. So I want us to conclude by singing that song later called Hymn of Heaven. And in this song, the words here remind us that there will be a day when all will bow before Him. There will be a day when death will be no more, standing face to face with He who died and rose again. Holy, holy is the Lord. And on that day, we join the resurrection, and we will stand beside every hero that we can remember, the heroes of our faith. And with one voice, 1,000 generations will sing, worthy, worthy is the Lamb who was slain, and forever He shall reign. So the song reminds us, there will be a day when King Jesus returns. There will be a day when death can no longer separate us from the people we love. There will be a day when Christ returns with those we love, and there will be a wonderful reunion. So on that day, we join the resurrection. We stand beside these heroes of the faith. And when we sing later, I want us to remember the heroes that have gone ahead of us. Remember them, put them next to you, and join them in a glorious song of resurrection. Let me conclude now. The problem in the book of Judges was that the ancient Israel had no king, and everyone did as they saw fit. But we are not ancient Israel. They didn't have a king. We have a king. We don't just have a king. We have the King of Kings, and He is coming back. And He's not coming back alone. He's coming back with those who went before us, the heroes of our faith, the faithful heroes. And when He returns, we can stand together with all these heroes of the faith, and we shall sing, worthy, worthy is the Lamb who was slain, and together with Him we shall reign. God bless you all. Thank you.